Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the ColdFusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Welcome back to the Modernize or Die podcast, the CFML News Edition. It's November 24th, 2020, the week of Thanksgiving. Are you thankful, Brad?
Yeah, I'm thankful we're on this podcast, because otherwise I'd be doing like work and making money, so who's got time for that, right?
Exactly. Speaking of making money, thanks to Order Solutions, we're able to actually produce this podcast, so thank you, Ordis, for doing that. One way you can give back to Order Solutions is to sign up for Into the Box Latam. For only $7, you can sign up for the Into the Box Latam 2-day conference, which has English and Spanish, and it's next week, December 3rd and 4th. We'll tell you more in the conference section. And CFCasts is another solution where you can pay for a subscription, and that goes towards supporting Order Solution, and you get free and paid content every week through cfcast.com. And we also have a lot of individuals supporting us via Patreon. We have 34 individuals, which is pretty dang cool. And 58% of our funding for this podcast. So they're actually paying more than Ordis is to make this podcast happen. So thank you so much to everybody there. And we'll give you more details about how to support us with Patreon and who those people are at the end of the show. Okay, so let's get into the news and events, and we got a few security updates. So first one up, security vulnerability alert for Lucee. You want to give us some details on this, Mad Typer Brad?
No.
Well,
I mean, I know what the details are, but I'm not going to tell you. So Lucee has announced a security release. If you look carefully, you'll notice that holy cow, it's almost been a freaking month. You'll notice that the Lucee builds that were released came out around October 29th that actually contain the security fix. Lucee didn't manage to put a blog post out until like yesterday. You're going to want to update to that. There is an actual exploit that's been found for Lucee that will have the details of it released soon to the greater wide internet. I don't like it when security researchers do that. I really think it defeats the purpose of creating a secure internet when they're like, hey, here's how to hack server XYZ, all the details. Oh, I'm the good guy. I have strong feelings about that. But either way, Lucee doesn't get a choice because this was found by someone who said, I'm going to release this information. And they at least said they would wait until they released the notice. However, if your Lucee web administrator is not accessible to the public, which it shouldn't be, but unfortunately, most people don't lock it down, you're fine. This is an exploit that affects the web-based administrator, as Adobe has had many of these over the years. It was sort of only a matter of time before somebody found one in the Lucee administrator. So I don't know if hackers worldwide will jump on the information and try to find Lucee servers that are vulnerable and attack them. It is a very nasty one. It does allow a hacker to take basically control of your server via remote code execution. So lock down your ColdFusion administrators, your Lucee administrators. Step 2, lock down your Lucee administrators. Step 3, apply the update. And Step 4, lock down your freaking Lucee administrators. So make sure you get a hold of that, or get ahead of that, rather, not a hold of it.
Yep, and we're sharing the link right now to go find out more about it. But as you say, locking it down is one thing, but there is an update for those versions too. So get the updated patched version as well, just to be extra safe.
Yeah, and it is worth noting that not only is the patch going into 5.3.8, but they put a patch out for 5.3.7 and 5.3.6 and 5.3.5. So even if you're on a slightly older version of Lucee, and you haven't updated and you don't want to update maybe because there's some breaking changes, you can still go apply that patch. And the only thing in the patch is the fixes to secure the administrator. And there's also an update to the Java mail jar, because that's actually one of the things that was preventing people from being able to update one of the regressions. But yeah, so you may be thinking, I'm a couple versions behind on Lucee. They do have patches all the way back to 5.3.5, which is a good thing.
5.3.5, 5.3.6, 5.3.7. So, Yep. So definitely go check it out, and look after yourselves. Okay, so next up we have another security update. It's not just security, but there's some security updates in there, and
It basically is a security update.
yeah. So TestBox
We
4.2
wouldn't
has
have
been
released
released.
TestBox 4.2 if it wasn't for the security fixes we added. But
Yeah. So yeah. So obviously, TestBox is supposed to be a development module, basic development library. You shouldn't have it in production, and if you do an install dash dash production, it should not install if you have it as as a
a
dev
development
dependency.
dependency, yeah.
But a lot of people don't do that. They have them on their staging servers, production servers, front facing. So there's a few things in there that you need to do. But there are some updates, obviously, in this too. So TSBox 294 and 293 have some security updates as well. So we want to make sure everyone's running TSBox, and hopefully that's everybody here is running TSBox. But definitely update it, and then look at making sure that all your production servers and staging servers that are forward-facing, public-facing, do not expose TestBox. So
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are people who push TestBox out just because it's part of their code base, and they just kind of push all the files to production. But you definitely don't want to do that. So even though you should update to the latest version of TestBox, check your production servers and make sure you haven't pushed it out somewhere. Unfortunately, the TestBox vulnerability is just as nasty as the Lucee one. This has been a bad month for security updates.
I guess it's a
Command
good month
Box's
that we
release,
found it, though.
yeah, Command Box's release has security updates. TestBox kind of had a security issue, and Lucee had a security issue, all kind of in the same time frame. But the TestBox one is actually published already. And if you Google it, you can probably find it. We actually found out because the security researcher had posted it somewhere, and we saw tweets, and we're like, oh dear, TestBox should not be in production, but still, we should put in some mitigation just in case. But this also does allow for remote code execution exploit, which would allow a hacker to potentially take over your server. Of course, if ColdFusion or Lucee was running as root or something, but it's a fairly nasty one. So check your production servers for TestBox, wipe it out of us there, and make sure you update. We've also updated all of the application templates. So if you type like ColdBox create app from Command Box, we've updated that to use the latest version. If you have there's a code browser that comes with TestBox that in the current ColdBox template is like the index.cfm in the test folder. That's not part of the TestBox core, even though it's in the TestBox repo. So I had this mentioned in the blog post, but in addition to updating the TestBox library itself, you'll want to check in your tests folder and see if you have an index.cfm that's that little test browser, because that file is also one of the files that's received a fix. And I think
That's a good point, because that's part of the test harness. Usually you create it and leave it. And
yeah.
touch it
So if you
again.
just update your TestBox library, you won't update anything in your test folder. So I have a link in the blog post that points to the correct index.cfm for that test browser that has some mitigation in place. So you'll want to check that on top of the TestBox library as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you'll obviously just do a box install and update your TestBox server, but not that. That's a one and done usually. So yeah, we should really highlight that one.
Yeah, it gets trickier when files kind of just become an organic part of the application, and those files came from some template that is found to have an issue. It's a little bit more difficult to update.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, definitely a good one there. I better finish patching the rest of my servers. And then we had something, Charlie actually just blog post, and then he sent us an email. Thanks, Charlie, for that. About a breaking change in Adobe ColdFusion 2021. So this breaking change is a change in the date format mask. So if you've used capital D in your date formats, previously that would work, no problem at all. But now capital D does not work. Correct, Brad? What does it actually do?
It's the day of the year, I believe, if I read Charlie's post correctly. I scanned through it right before our podcast.
Okay, so if you do a date format of 11/24/20 with capital MM, capital DD, capital YY, you'll get 11-329-2020.
329th day in the year.
Yeah.
So technically, the proper character for a day in a date mask was always a lowercase d, but Adobe, in its infinite helpfulness, would also accept an uppercase d and be like, yeah, sure, I know what you mean. So people all over the place probably have a mix of uppercase and lowercase d's that always just did day. And now suddenly in 2021, uppercase D just got a brand new meaning, and it's day of the year.
Because that
So
previously was a single Y for year, right? Day of the year.
no, I think why always worked.
No, no, YY was for year, but the one single Y was for day of the year.
Oh, honestly, I don't call it. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I mean, I
Charlie
remember
may have
doing that.
mentioned it.
So if you wanted the day of the year, you'd do a one single Y.
I know I've ran
But
into that kind of thing before.
but yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
I'll have
so I
to.
mean, as Charlie points out, this could range anywhere from just a mild nuisance on your display formatting to a major bug introduced into your application and some sort of core business logic that's calculating pricing or core things to your application, where suddenly a date being greater than or less than a date that you formatted, you can get a very unexpected result. So one of the things Charlie pointed out is there's not a super good way to know if you're using an uppercase date mask in your application, just since there's not really a single thing you can Google for. No, I said Google, search for. Geez. Though I'd mentioned to you, Gavin, it may be possible if we could create a regular expression that looked for things like date format, some variable, and then some quoted string that had an uppercase D in it. It may be possible to add a rule to the code checker tool that could try to find uh, date formats with uppercase D's in the mask to try to make it
Yeah,
easier for people to scan.
that would be a pretty good little update there. That might be something worth
Maybe
knocking
a
out here.
regular expression guru can play with that to see if they can find a regular expression that would sniff out any date formats. I didn't read Charlie's post close enough to see if it also applies to date time format and time format or only date format. Um, Either way, that's
Yeah,
definitely something that could
I'm
catch you off guard.
I'm running a couple tests right now here. We'll see what it does.
Ooh.
Well, I'm trying to, but apparently I've got some problems here with my code. Hmm. Apparently I can't do what I'm trying to do in TryCF on the Adobe 2021 version.
Ooh. Scott says he's on it.
Okay.
Go. Regex.
Yep. Regixer is a good tool for that. I'm sure that's what Scott's probably messing with. But
Yeah, I really like some of those online regex sites whenever I'm playing with regex.
well, all I know right now is on TryCF, I'm just trying to run an empty page on Adobe 2021 and it doesn't work. So there might be an issue with
Uh,
TryCF's 2021.
Abram was just adding 2021 to trycf.com like earlier today. In fact, I was chatting with him about that as I jumped onto the podcast. So it may not be fully up and running yet. He may
That might be
be in the
why.
middle of adding it.
Okay.
Um,
So
he's actually
TryCF will have
messaging me right
2021.
now.
Yeah, 2021 ACF will be available sometime on TryCFs in the near future. Just in case. I thought I had bad code and I wiped all the code out, still didn't work. So okay, well yeah, that's something to work on. Interesting, very interesting. There's always something with these new versions, so that's why update 1 is always my preferred updating time, at least. Never do the first release. So okay, next up, the thing is we're going to be doing. If you're using Big Sur, just to let you know, before you upgrade, if you're using ColdFusion Builder 2016 or 2018, it is not compatible with Big Sur. So if you're on the Mac OS and you go to update it, Adobe does know that it doesn't work. They're trying to work on it. If you look at the support matrix, Big Sur is not on it. So if you're using ColdFusion Builder and you think about updating, you may want to hold off or just use VS Code. That's what we always say. But no, if you like ColdFusion Builder, Big Sur will break your ColdFusion Builder. So heads up there. Okay, another thing too, CFWheels 2.2 was released. So another framework release. It says it has a changelog here with lots of details. Let's see what they got. So actually like a decent amount of changes. Let me pull up my screen share for those watching. So they've added a few controller enhancements, some model enhancements, some view enhancements, like 7 different fixes they've added. And as usual, it's good to see a lot of contributions from the community. I was trying to say community contributions at the same time. Didn't work. So
We should come up with a word for that, like contributions.
Yeah,
It's a community contribution.
something like that. You can do that, Brad. I know
Comes
you
from
and
the
English.
contribumunity. I don't know. It's a work
Yeah.
in progress.
Yep. So anyway, so they've got that release out. So good to see that. Nice to see other frameworks are making updates still and keeping busy. Okay, so since we've been speaking about updates, Adobe ColdFusion 2016 support ends February of 2021. So Charlie Earhart has a blog post about that.
I saw
And
that tweet, and I was actually wondering off the top of my head if that was core support or extended support. Not that it makes too much of a difference.
well, as true Charlie fashion, he's pretty thorough.
Let's see here.
So here you can see that 2016 general availability was February
Nice.
2016.
Has a whole chart here.
Yeah. So core support ends 2021. Extended support ends 2022. So
Perfect. Now,
yeah.
that said, it's worth noting that Alicia's clarified previously that extended support does not include any bug fixes from Adobe. It's only there to help you upgrade. So
Oh, really?
don't think that extended support means that if you're paying for special support with Adobe, you still ain't going to get any bug fixes in 2020 up until 217.
Now, what about
Alicia's
security
clarified
fixes?
a while back that I don't believe. Well, I'm sure they can always call it as they see fit. From my understanding, is once core support is over, there are no more releases for that version of ColdFusion.
Yeah,
and if
'cause
you're paying for extended support, that means they will help you upgrade. That's what you pay for, is them to help you upgrade. You
Yeah,
still
'cause
don't get fixes.
Here it does not include updates. So it doesn't say what type updates, just updates in general. Of course, Charlie's
Yeah.
in the chat too, telling us that as well.
Yeah, he says he has a link to that, which is really good to know.
Yeah, so like I said, Charlie's always very thorough. We appreciate that, Charlie. So
Yeah, and I think the point that I think I'm trying to make that Charlie probably agrees with is don't hold off on updating. Keep your servers on a new version of ColdFusion where you're going to get updates. Otherwise, you just get left behind.
yeah, I mean, if
And
you
I hate-
update even to 2018 right now, you've got until 2023 in July. So that's quite a long time.
You just have to have it on the calendar. I mean, I was helping somebody yesterday on ColdFusion 11 in the CFML Slack, and I'm sure there's really good reasons why their company is not updated. But I mean, they're in a point where they can't even use the latest version of ColdBox anymore because Adobe dropped support for ColdFusion 11 like 1,000 years ago. Ortus has already dropped support for it. ColdBox has moved on with ColdBox 6. There's tons of all these features and enhancements, and they're hitting up against bugs, core bugs in CF11, memory leaks, right?
Yep.
Bugs that the new version of ColdBox, works around, and they're completely just off in left field on ColdFusion 11. And you don't want to be there. So 2016 is going to, be the next left field for you.
Yep.
Sooner or later.
ColdFusion 11 core support ended in April 30th of 2019. So we've been over a year and a half, So yeah, that's why we've been dropping it from all our packages. I mean, because designing a library that supports multiple engines isn't easy, but multiple engines and their versions isn't easy. And like
the Elvis operator alone was enough to make us want to burn Adobe ColdFusion 11 at the stake. Every time Luis would try to put the Elvis operator into ColdBox, when he'd have this cursing fit, not really, but and he'd have to rip it all back out because they would have fixed stuff in 2016, 2018, but 11 would still have all these bugs that were just never going to be addressed. So yeah, I mean, Ortus just gets to a point where we can't hold on to these old platforms. We've got to move on. And if you're still on the old platform, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. We were talking about the Adobe updates and everything. It's like, oh, 2021 has this. And Eric's like, awesome. Now I can finally use that in 2026.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing as a framework developer. You look at new features that come in the language and you're like, that's really cool. I won't be able to use that for a long time because it's going to be that long before, ColdBox or whatever library you're developing, we'll be able to only support that version of Ford. But
yep. So about
that's
a
just
6 year window. So we're 6 years behind in the core. So if we drop something, it means that you're more than 6 years behind.
You know what? It's a guilty pleasure of mine, if you'd word it that way, that in command box, I get to choose the version of Lucee it runs, and I can update it whenever I want. And so if Lucee drops a new feature, and I update that version of Lucee in the command box, I can use that new feature right away. And it's like, yes. Whoa. Some guy's getting blocked messages in the chat. Some Scott Steinbeck is posting, is that a hack? Some kind of hack attempt? Oh, no, it's a regular expression. Oh, good thing YouTube was blocking that comment, that dangerous comment full of regular expression goodness. Sorry, I'm making fun of YouTube if you didn't catch.
Yeah. Hey, well, at least you gave us an option to show it. Usually it just hides it and you can never do anything. Like Charlie would post links before and they would never show. This time this is, would you like to show it or hide it?
Big Brother's looking out for you, Gavin. You just need to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott has a regular expression here that he thinks we'll find. It looks like he's supporting date format and LS date format. Trying to find if there's an uppercase D inside of there. Interesting. All right. We'll let Charlie and Scott discuss how good that regular expression will be, because you know what they say about regular expressions. You think, I have a problem, I'll solve it with a regular expression. Now you have two problems. So,
or at least two.
At least two. Sometimes it's exponential.
Yep.
Okay, so a little off topic, but yes, update your ColdFusion servers before your support ends. Thanks, Charlie, for mapping that out.
Yeah.
Charlie's post always just have all the information in just one spot.
Yep, I really like those posts. Okay, so Giancarlo Gomez started a little thread up on the Sentry site this week about adding ColdFusion as a platform. So we've been around 25 years. I think it's time we become a platform. But so the cool thing is Sentry. We've talked about it on the podcast before. It's a great service. We love it, and ColdFusion is not listed as a platform yet. So he wanted to know what we could do to get it added. He talked about a couple of different packages. So the one that Giancarlo created, Sentry CFML, and then the one that you actually created, the ColdBox module for Sentry.
Yeah, and mine's actually based on Giancarlo's original project, so
it's just ColdBox.
Kind of all. It's the granddaddy one. Yeah, there's a couple places that he wants to get it added. If you go on the Sentry documentation website, they have a big list of like kind of officially first-class supported languages, and that basically means that the Sentry developers support the SDKs for those. And then there's a list of community languages that aren't supported directly by Sentry, but there's people in the community that manage them, and that's where our libraries would fall. And so we definitely want to get CFML listed on that. And then as well, when you're inside of the Sentry interface and you're saying, I want to create a new project, it has a little kind of cute drop down that says, okay, what language are you using? Just to, help it make as much sense as possible. And of course, we'd like to be able to have CFML listed there as well. So the help on the screen tells them how to install using instructions that are specific to the ColdBox. Or no, I'm sorry, not ColdBox, the ColdFusion based SDKs. So we'll see if we get any bite on that. I told Giancarlo, he'd asked me, and I told him to post there. I've actually had really pretty bad experience getting anybody to reply on the Sentry discourse forum. It's kind of like a ghost town. Well, it's sort of like, oh, you're not paying us money? Oh, you want community support? All right, you peasant, go post on our discourse and good luck. Maybe someone will reply if you're lucky. That's kind of the impression I've gotten. But nonetheless, we got to at least put it out there. So if you guys can make some noise, go. You can create a quick and easy, single sign-on account on their discourse forum. Put a comment and be like, hey, we use this. ColdFusion deserves to be supported. Maybe we can get some attention on it, because it shouldn't be too hard for them to at least add it to their community list of SDKs.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, there's a few people viewed it. So, yeah, let's get a couple more likes on there and, see if we make some noise. Hey, it worked for other things we've done, right?
It's true.
Yep. So
making the noise. Oh,
ooh,
yeah.
And Will has a paid account, man. He's rolling in it.
Yeah,
so
he's got him wrapped around his little finger. They'll do whatever he asks.
Yeah, so Will, we appreciate that. Maybe you can make it work. But yeah.
I'll tell you what, Ortis totally uses the free. We run our own Docker container. We don't pay him a dime, but it sure is useful.
Yeah, and we do love Sentry, using a lot of projects. I mean, we've used Rollbound before. We used Buglog HQ back in the day too, but they just getting better and better. And Sentry's really a great tool. I mean, I know that we're talking in the Box team. I think Will was talking about that with Sam, and it's nice to have all your projects and your development tiers and everything, and it's set up to really work nicely. You have a lot of information you can pass through in your logging, and there's logbox appenders for it and everything too. So
I was just working with one of our clients, Gavin. You might be able to guess who it was yesterday.
Maybe.
And they were taking one of their old ColdFusion sites that's still on a CF9 box. We've been slowly converting over to Lucee. And as part of our Lucee conversion, we dropped the ColdBox platform just into the application bootstrap, not even rewriting in the application, still a legacy application, but we just dropped ColdBox into the bootstrap. That allowed us to do install Sentry, drop Sentry in, threw in some environment variables to configure Sentry, and then in the on error of their application.cfc, put a couple lines of code that just reaches out, grabs Logbox, and shoves the error into Logbox, and we're done. And that application now, all of its errors are being funneled into Sentry, and we did it over Zoom in like 5-10 minutes, just putting in some boilerplate. And of course, if it was already a ColdBox app to begin with, it would have been even easier. But it wasn't even that hard just to add the boilerplate in to add the ColdBox bootstrap. But it was an application that basically was a black hole of error logging. And now, a couple lines of code pointed at their Sentry instance, and they have all this reporting and stuff inside of Sentry, all via the magic of the Sentry module and Logbox. So
Yeah.
it's very nice to have around.
Yep, I definitely love Sentry. I have, some of my Quasar Android apps using it. I have Spy sites using it. I have ColdFusion apps using it. I've got all different things, and I love being able to just like filter by environment and everything. It's pretty neat. So definitely like that. Okay, so next up, we just want to remind you about the Seattle CFUG meeting on the deep dive hands-on Thinkific API. So this is their second session. It was originally scheduled for November 11th. It's going to be on December the 9th, and that's from 6 to 7 Pacific. 6 to 7:30 Pacific, and that's going to be Leona Daniel talking about that. And if you go to meetup.com/Seattle User Group, you can see that event. So definitely check it out, and they have the video available on the previous event if you want to see, getting started with the Thinkific API, which is a great API, and it's also a great one to learn about how to tie in with ColdFusion. So definitely recommend that. Okay, so let's talk about CFCasts. And because we had a special podcast last Thursday, we actually missed the drop spot. So I'm just going to recap what we did last week. There'll be new stuff coming out tomorrow. But we had the last two sessions, or videos, on configuring your CFML servers with CFConfig. Grant finished up the service layer and the practical uses and wrap up of using CFConfig. So that whole series is now complete and out there. And we have apparently a surprise coming for you. A Zero to Hero workshop videos will be released this month. So in the next week we should have that, or you guys can tell them they shouldn't be lying on Twitter, because Twitter's the source of truth, But also we've updated the site, so now there's language filters on the site, and you've also added difficulty. So CFCast has got some updates, more content coming all the time. Should check that out. And actually, Eric is busy working on videos today, and that's why he couldn't be on the podcast, so we have to deal with Brad again. So
I'm so sorry.
So yeah, so
cranking
more
out
content coming tomorrow.
CFCast content.
Yep. Okay, so next up, let's talk about conferences and trainings. So if you're sick of all your Thanksgiving eats and you want to do some learning, Google has a DevFest Silicon Valley this Saturday. So no, actually it's next Saturday, December the 5th. My bad. So December the 5th, they're having a one-day, just a short, sweet, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Conference. There's 2 tracks, 4 hours, 4 sessions in each track, and some opening and closing remarks. So a short and sweet Saturday learning experience. And Charlie recommended this one. He says there's quite a few topics that ColdFusionists should find interesting. So if you look on the little meetup website, you can find out some more about it. But they're talking about Flutter, progressive web apps, Google Assistants. I know a few people have been talking about those too. Recycler View, some serverless applications with Firebase. Firebase is a cool tech. You should look into that. And then growing cloud applications, Cloud Run. Yeah, some good stuff. So quite a lot of good speakers, good sessions. So pretty sure this was a free event too. So definitely check that one out as well. And then the next one is our behemoth 3-week conference, right, Brad? Because a 1-week conference wasn't enough.
3-week conference.
Yep. So AWS reInvent is going to be held over 3 weeks. It's a virtual conference, and it looks like they're going to be doing it in all time zones. So they'll have recorded sessions released in different time zones and everything, and repeated over time. So lots of great content there. Um, Last year they had 60,000 attendees in person. Kind of crazy, but a lot of good content, a lot of good announcements. I know they usually announce another 30, 40, 50 different Amazon services you can get. So definitely check out this. And it is free. You can register now. This is usually a premium, high cost conference, so it's definitely a big must see, must do. So sign up for that one too. And then, Brad, I'll let you tell us about your Spanish experience with Into the Box Latam.
It's not an experience yet, but I will be presenting on Command Box at the end of the box Latam. And so I'm going to be talking in Spanglish, or I mean English rather. But the slides will have Spanish translations, and there'll be people in the chat helping translate. So we'll see how that goes. It should be interesting, but we're trying to make it as native as possible for native Spanish speakers that might not be good with English. So I'm definitely not good with Spanish enough to present it in Spanish, but
Yeah, I'm
it'll
definitely
be
not.
fun either way.
Yeah, I'm not doing it because English people have enough trouble understanding me, let alone Spanish people. So, but there's some good sessions from some of the ColdFusion developers we have in the US, and also some of our Salvadorian team like Abilio and Davis, Javier, and we actually have a few people coming from AWS are going to be speaking as well. I know we're getting their information put up here as well. So a lot of good sessions, and it is a 2-day conference, so even more. Um, oh, we got John talking about his mustache, his stash box, log stash. So yeah, a lot of good content. And again, it's only $7. We try to make it region pricing aware. So if you're in the US, you get a bonus. It's only $7. So uh, can't say no to that, right? So
Yep, pretty good deal.
okay. And then following week, we have a workshop by Pete Freitag. So his hands-on ColdFusion security training class for developers is going to be available online, and that's going to be Thursday, December 10th and the 11th. And you can get more information at foundeo.com. This is a great workshop. He's done this at Into the Box. He's done it at CF Summit multiple years, so definitely recommend it. The early bird pricing is available to December 1st. So you got 1 week from now to get the early bird pricing. And if you don't have time to make this, he does have on-demand training, so video versions of the previous training if you prefer, and you can purchase those videos separately. So I really enjoy his sessions. You actually see how someone would take advantage of your site, and then you actually put in the fix so you can fix it, and then you can try and break into it again. He shows you some pretty cool tools for testing yourself and your own apps. I really enjoyed these sessions with him.
Speaking of Pete Freitag,
Yes.
we've mentioned several security vulnerabilities. Pete has updated his Fixinator and Hack My CF stuff to
Ooh.
include everything. So, including looking, I mean, he already looks for public Lucee administrators, but he's checking Lucee versions. He's also checking command box versions and runware versions. And he's also checking for TestBox now as well. So, that's a good plug to tap in. So, like, if you're not familiar, Pete's Hack My CF is a service that you basically give permission to probe your ColdFusion servers on a regular basis, and he'll check for all sorts of known vulnerabilities. He updates it on a regular basis, and he'll email you right away if he finds anything wrong with your server, which could be, a non-lockdown default error page, a public Lucee administrator, an outdated version of Lucee. But that's already been updated to include all the security updates we've talked about. So, on the topic of Pete Freitag, definitely check out his Fixinator and his Hack My CF, because it'll make sure you're kept abreast of all this stuff, even if you don't watch the podcast or follow Twitter or keep up with everything.
Yeah, those are great services and tools. No surprise there that Pete's on the ball with that stuff. So thanks, Pete. We appreciate it. Okay, we also have the ColdFusion certification, which is available online. If you want to register, you can register through a couple links, which we have in the show notes there. If you go to adobe.com/products and you go to ColdFusion's family, you'll see the certificate link here, so you can register. So it tells you a bit about how it works, the requirements, and then the pricing. So introductory offer is still good for $4.99. Basically, you get access to the videos and the test as well. So, wonder how many the numbers are up to. We should reach out and see how many they've got certified now. I know with the CF Summit last year, they had, I think, almost 100 people pass from that training, and they continue to offer it. So, I wonder what that number snuck up to now.
Yeah, that'd be cool to see. To back up a few minutes ago, you were just trying out the Adobe ColdFusion 2021 on TryCF, which, by the way, has also been added to CF Fiddle today.
Okay.
I told you Abram was in the middle of adding it as we were speaking. He just messaged me and I confirmed. And TryCF, as of like 20 seconds ago, now has Adobe ColdFusion 2021 running, of course, inside of Command Box and I think possibly Docker. But yeah, so that's out there. He was just in the middle of adding it.
Okay.
Apparently, he's out in the middle of nowhere on some satellite connection. I'm imagining him on like a yacht in the middle of the ocean or something. I don't actually know where he's at, but that is now added live on the air apparently.
Okay, well, I'm going to add that to my show notes. So anyone who's listening, you'll get links there to TryCF as well, so you can try it out. It's a good service. A lot of cool pieces to it. One of the most used pieces is the Scratchpad, which allows you to try ColdFusion code on lots of different engines right there in your browser without having to install anything. So,
and I use it a lot on Slack. The shortcut, you come up with a code snippet, and you want to share it with someone, you just hit Control S, and it saves a gist with the code. A link pops up. You can right-click, copy the URL, paste it in chat. I'll put it in Lucee ticket trackers. I'll put it in the Adobe tracker as, here's a link to a runnable example that shows what I'm talking about.
Pretty cool. Okay.
Charlie just clarified that apparently it's been a CF Fiddle for a couple days. I just today saw the messages in the Adobe channel. Somebody had asked a couple days ago if it was on CF Fiddle, and I just seen messages saying it was there today, but apparently it has been on CF Fiddle for a few days. Yeah, John Wilsh just said at 3:03 a.m. Central Time that CF Fiddle has it on, but maybe that's just the first time he had checked.
Okay. Cool. And then Charlie and Scott are discussing the regex in the chat. So anyone who's watching, there's someone there. And I guess you got to make sure that you've got the case sensitivity checked if you're in, depending on your tool, like Notepad++ versus VS Code, etc. So they're working on it. I'm sure Scott will share it pretty soon, and we'll make it available once we have that too. Okay. And then
So what's next?
Yeah, let's talk about some blog posts. So, first up, we have Charlie Earhart's breaking change in CF 2021. So we've discussed that with the date format mask of D. And I'm sure if Charlie gets the regex, he'll probably update the article. He's pretty good about backdating and updating articles, so he'll probably make that available on there as well. We also mentioned about the updates for 2016 ending 2021. So, make sure you update. So we were discussed that as well. Let's get to some new stuff. We have Dopefly, Nathan Strutz, had a blog post. And I found this one pretty interesting. So I teach coding to high school students. And so he talks a little bit about, the process, and they've got like a homeschool co-op and everything with COVID and everything. It's pretty interesting. So he sort of talked about why he chose JavaScript over other languages and what he was trying to do, which I thought was pretty interesting. But more importantly is at the bottom, he used this blog post as a retrospective. So these are the lessons learned. So this is where I think you get a lot of value out of this blog post. So he talks about there's mental hang-ups when first trying to put code into text. Different braces and brackets are really confusing for people. And he said his student dropped out. He said his youngest one in his class was 14. He basically, said that he was a super smart person and still dropped out. But, other kids who are older, but, just different abilities, different things. And so it's just sort of some lessons that learned there. Typing speed is a big thing. I get my kids whenever they're bored, I make them do typing because no matter what, they need to type better, and that's one of the things. Most of the kids were typing under 30 words per minute or whatever. So basically, typing is something everybody can improve. And so if your kids got too much time, make them do some typing. Um, but yeah, so talking about creating files was a challenge. There's like 44 ways to do it in VS Code. So anyway, I thought this was really interesting. Basically look through it. You might learn something for yourself too if you've got kids or you're helping people learn. I know a lot of people ask me how to learn to code. So even this is talking about high school kids. There's a lot of good stuff in there that you may want to pick and choose when you're teaching someone. So this is the first time he taught it, so he's learned a lot, and they're going to be doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript basically. So it's pretty cool. But one of the things I thought was interesting, he even had them install Prettier to help them clean up the typing. So they're worried about what they typed and not how it looked, which is a good thing too, because you know how much formatting can cause headaches and trouble with groups of developers. Can you imagine that in a classroom?
Yeah, it was kind of nice. I mean, it's funny, like when I learned, programming, which was really not until I got to college, which is the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, most of what I touched was like C++ code, a little bit of Visual Basic. I didn't even know if there were like formatting tools. A lot of the sort of like code quality things that we're used to now, like linting and formatting, that wasn't even like a thing back when they taught me how to code. And it almost kind of encouraged, you know, ugly stuff. So it's nice to see, that kind of being a first class thing that you learn, with programming languages, doing stuff right and doing it clean. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about VS Code and all the damn extensions we talk about every week, and half of them are how to make your code look easier to understand, like the bracket highlighters and indent highlighters and the to-do things and just all these little things that just make your life as a developer easy or easier. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny. But I mean, it's interesting. I said it at first. I thought, oh yeah, just another high school thing. But there was a lot of good tidbits in that lessons learned. So uh, check that out. Like I say, I'm sure everyone's had the opportunity to try and teach somebody, and maybe just pointing them at something like that might help too. So. So Vil de Bruin had a few blog posts this week, so I guess we'll do them in order since they're all together. So the first thing he did was one on protecting your passwords with bcrypt. So bcrypt is actually included in 2021 now, but for those of you wanting to use that, or if you're using it through the ColdBox app that we have modules for that through ForgeBox. This one's kind of cool. It goes through, bcrypt and it sort of explains it. I like the fact that he, looks at different factors. He talks about, how to distinguish what different parts of the password are what. So it talks about salts and the hashes and work factors, and so it's kind of an interesting one to look and see how everything works. But long story short, passwords, if you brute force them, you can crack them. So bcrypt has a work factor to slow it down, so it makes it harder for people to try and figure out your password. And the cool thing is I like about bcrypt is, which did catch me one time, is even if you have the same password on two different systems, it won't show up in the database the same way because it randomly generates the salt, and so the same password in the same database will not look the same. So it's kind of interesting. The bad thing is if you're just comparing what's in the database for if your password's correct, it won't work. You've got to make check password. Make sure that you're using check password on bcrypt to make sure they're actually the same password. So that's caught me up. But pretty good blog post, a lot of detail there. But that also brings us to the next one. And so his next one talked about arguments and arguments. And the interesting thing about this one was he was talking about how when you're hashing a password, you have two optional things you can pass in, the work factor and the salt. And so if you look at the functions, if you hash your password and you pass in a work factor, it'll do so much work so many times to get it done. But if you wanted to increase the work factor and you want to provide the salt, it may actually have a side effect. And so he realized they were basically taking the same amount of time when he upped the work factor. And so we went in and actually inside the hash password function, he saw that the salt was generating a salt here, but the work factor was up here, and so he modified his to actually use the arguments.work factor. So he used an argument inside the argument scope to default the value for the salt. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, you have to use the work factor when generating the salt. So if you have a default value of generating the salt, you have to use the work factor. So he's actually defaulting to the work factor, which defaults to a setting. So I was kind of curious if this is, a bug that he found, or if it was just some modification that we should make it a little more friendly. But this seemed to solve his problem of changing the work factor. Actually, does change the time needed to process that password. So I thought that was pretty neat too. So, do you know who did the work? Who did that one originally? Do you remember the bcrypt library? Was that one of the oldest ones, or
The original, well,
because it
there
looks
was
like
a
it's a
bcrypt.
bug? And Will's already submitted the PI, the pull request for that. So
Yeah, there was a bcrypt plugin like a billion years ago, I think, for ColdBox back before ColdBox 4. I think that at one point, one of my old coworkers, Seth Feldkamp, had created a ColdBox module for it. But yeah, I've lost track of what's still out there at this point.
okay, so
Where it came from.
it is an oldest one, so we must have adopted and created.
Yeah, I
the
think we reached out at one point
version.
and asked if we could take it over.
Okay, cool. So he's already got the pull request in for that, which is neat. So yeah, so a side effect of the work factor wasn't actually creating additional work factors. So interesting. We also have one more from Vil, and that one is about CBRM populating new objects. He mentioned in the Fluent API approach webinar I gave a while back. We did some kind of interesting things with creating new ORM objects. And so we talked about CBRM 1 versus 2. So if you guys are using CBRM, you may want to look at this blog post because it updates to use CBRM 2 and sort of talks about the Fluent style that V2 has. And so some pretty interesting, use cases. And we're always trying to improve our code, right, Brad? Trying to make it a little more fluent. Luis likes the fluent stuff.
That's because Luis is fluent in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. That's why he likes fluent stuff.
So yeah, this is a good blog post. If you're using ORM, you may get some nice little tidbits here, just ways to improve. He talks about using virtual entity services and everything too, so pretty cool. So thanks, Phil. A lot of good blog posts this week. Okay, and then this one I'll let you talk about, Brad, because Matthew Clemente had a live stream, and we'll have to talk about this module in a week or two for a ForgeBox module. But
all right,
CF Summit session wasn't enough, so
yeah,
he had to do more.
Yep. So building a command box custom command to generate markdown docs, learning by trial and error. And so I guess a few people talked, after the session gave him an inspiration, so he decides to live stream making a custom command. So how about that for a session add-on?
You need to add to your notes. He actually, unless you have it later on down, he actually sent out a later tweet, and he has a link to the project he created.
Yeah, I do.
You had that later down?
Yeah, well, I have it for the next week. I was actually going to put that as the ForgeBox module of the week. So.
Okay. Well, I added the link to that in case anyone wants to look at that as well. Command box CFC to markdown docs.
Perfect. So yeah, so that was a cool little video. It's always good to see other people creating custom commands, and you always learn something from it. And then up after that, we have something from TerraText. So this is a good rundown. TerraText has a more marketing focused pieces usually, but Adobe ColdFusion 2021 in the cloud, and so breaks down a lot of different things here. You can see, why is it so good? making the cloud easy, CF Script 2.0. And so this is kind of a summary version of a lot of things you would have seen in the keynote at CF Summit and a lot of the docs and what people are talking about. So, like I said, it's more marketing style, but if you want a quick overview of what it does and how it works, it's a good blog post for that. Okay. So we also mentioned TestBox 4.2 is being released, and we have the blog post there for that. Don't forget to update your runner index.cfm as well. Okay, so this one, an interesting one from Ben Adele.
Yeah, I laughed when I saw the title on this one.
Yeah. List the unsung heroes of ColdFusion and Lucee. Which is kind of funny, because when you first start programming ColdFusion, you learn heavily that, everything is a string, And then the funny thing is you learn that string manipulation is slow, right? So one thing is you're like, everything's a string, but strings are slow, so don't use them. So then you start using stuff like structures, like arrays and structs or whatever. But this one sort of talks about some of the cool things about lists and some things you may not know and some of the tricks that we use with strings. There's a lot of member functions, so you'll see like list first, or the list first function by itself, and so a lot of these are using that. But in natively passing names, you can use any delimiter with lists, and so a lot of times people use spaces or even no space, and therefore every character becomes an item in the list. So talking about doing things like getting the first name using a space, and then getting the rest of the name to get the last name or whatnot. The funny thing is, Ben did mention that his wife's name has a space in it. Like my wife, Sarah Bell, his wife's name is Mary Kate, and so it's pretty funny that that wouldn't work for our wives. But other little tricks or whatever for like passing email addresses. If you use the @ for the delimiter, you can get the first part and the rest of the email. And then file names is pretty interesting too. Use the dot to be able to separate that. But URLs, lots of little tricks there in life, So.
See, it's kind of funny because lists get a fair amount of hate in the CF world, and some of the hate is well deserved. I love Ben's examples because I don't typically go out of my way to use a list if I have a choice in the data structure. I want to store 5 items. I would probably use an array, because when you use an array, you don't have to worry about is there a comma in the values and things like that. But I think what Ben's pointing out, which I really like, is there's a lot of existing strings, whether it's a name or an email or a file path, things that just come to you that you don't create, that you want to be able to pick apart. And it can be super handy to use those list functions on them. If you know that a file path has an extension and there's going to be a dot and then some text after it, you can use the list functions as a nice, easy way to trim that off.
Yeah.
So that's where I think lists really shine. It's not necessarily when I say to myself, what data structure should I use? But when I look at a string and I think to myself, I need to parse this, and I'm like, hey, I can parse this as a list.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is because strings, everyone complains about them being slow. They're slow when you're adding and removing stuff out of strings, whenever you're changing the value of a string. But yeah, reading from them, using those list functions on them, that's not a problem. So I think you're right. That makes perfect sense. And yeah, a lot of times we were passing them, there's just so many little helpers that the list gives you that doing normal old school string manipulation would just be a little more painful.
Yeah, the list first and list rest and list last are super handy. And there's a lot of power in being able to choose the delimiter, because by default the delimiter is a comma. The delimiter can be anything. It can be a space. It can be the @ sign. It can be a period. And all of a sudden, strings that you touch on a regular basis in CFML, any of those can become a list all of a sudden, and it's a super powerful thing. I think so.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so next up, we have a Fusion Reactor blog post here. This is an interesting one. I know that Adobe CF 2021 just came out, but this one's an article by Neil comparing ColdFusion 2018 versus Lucee. So basically it breaks down from several different pieces, the pros and cons of each one. So if you guys are looking at maybe switching from one to the other, or obviously 2021 came out, so there's some new stuff in there, but I just thought it'd be a good one to share and see people look at different options for like price, installation, user support, language support, hosting, security, special features, etc. So, it does a pretty good job of breaking it down. I'm sure there's probably a couple things missing here, but, there's a couple of options to and from. But, if you're looking at evaluating, maybe read this and may pick up something you might not have realized already. Okay, so jobs. Next up on our list here. So Get CFML Jobs has 3 new jobs this week. So we have a remote ColdFusion developer at Frederick. We have a senior full stack developer at Remote in Canada. We have a ColdFusion developer, immediate joiners only, at Bengaluru.
Immediate what?
Immediate joiners only. So I guess that means they need to be able to start right away. So
okay.
So yeah, so 3 good jobs there, and let's see, there's quite a few. This month has been a pretty big push for jobs. So if you guys are looking, it looks like it's a good time to be looking. Lots of good options there in India, Canada, United States, United Kingdom. So a lot of good options there. Okay, so we want to mention as well, Otis is still looking. It's still on the website. We're usually always looking, to be honest. We're pretty busy, and so if we're looking for a good developer, senior developer, CFML developer, if you want, go check out the site on autosolutions.com. If you go to About Us/careers, you can see we have the full job description there. U.S. time zone availability is a must, and U.S. citizen or resident or work visa is a must. But a lot of other options, and a little bit about the job and what we'll be doing and what type of things you can work on. So check that out if you're looking, and we'll definitely keep you in mind too if we for future jobs as well. Okay, so this one's a pretty good one. Our ForgeBox module of the week. I just ran into this one. I didn't even know it existed. But
oldie but a goodie, the show notes say.
Yeah, so this is something I wish I knew about a long time ago. And it is the ORM Reload Interceptor. And so our very own Eric Peterson built it way back in 2016. So that's a long time ago. But it still does a good job. So the ORM Reload Interceptor basically allows you to reload your ORM just like you would reinit your framework with ColdBox. So you can do an ORM reload equals and put in your ORM password if you've set one. And that just allows you to reload your ORM. And then there's also an ORM reload on reinit. So you can set it up to auto reload or false, set true or false there. But basically, when you reinit your ColdBox framework, you can have it reload the ORM as well. So this is great in development when you're making changes to your ORM entities, and you want to be able to reload and update the database as needed. And so, yeah, something if you're working with ORM, this is a pretty cool little tool, and it basically just listens for the URL and intercepts that event and does what it needs to. So nothing too fancy, but a real a lifesaver. I remember having to go and add all this code into my apps to reload at the right time and make sure my tests were reloading and this and that. So
yeah, we would always have to have that kind of boilerplate somewhere in your application.cfc to make sure you reloaded ORM.
Yep. Otherwise, you'd have to restart the server, and yeah, always kind of a pain. So ORM reload with the flag. Great little interceptor. But yeah, simple as that. Okay, so next up we have our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. And this one I thought we'd already done like many times, and I don't even know if this might be part of the core now, but it's definitely useful. It is the auto rename tag. It's got over 4 million installs. I don't know why the settings are so low, only 3 stars, but it does what it says on the box. It auto renames paired HTML and XML tags. And so if you're working...
what does it rename them to?
Whatever you decide to type in. So if you click on an opening or a closing tag and you start typing and renaming it, it's smart enough to go find the tag. And
you've got like a div and you want to change it to a span. You
Yep.
can just okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, simple little activity, but if you're using this over and over again, yeah, like you say, changing from divs to spans, or maybe your company says we can't use bold tags anymore. You've got to do it this way.
Can't use the B tag. Come on, man. That's
Yep,
the foundation of my front end design.
yep. So stuff like that. Yeah, just simple little things, but it's a helpful little module, a little extension. So that's our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week. That little extension, auto rename tag. And yep, and that brings us to the end of our show. We thank our marvelous, amazing supporters from Patreon. So patreon.com/ordersolutions gives you a variety of packages where you can spend your hard-earned dollars to thank us for our work with the podcast and pay for all the fun things that go along with creating our podcast here. Once we reach our full funding, we're going to be using that money to also help our other projects like CommandBox, ForgeBox, ColdBox, ContentBox, and TestBox. But by you helping, it means Audis spending less money on the podcast, so they can spend more money on those things too. So even though it's not directly helping it yet, indirectly you're still helping support all of those things that Audis does. So imagine if ForgeBox you had to pay for every package you put up there and every package you downloaded. That would be sad. So thank you, Patreon supporters, for helping that.
What if we just started charging for ForgeBox installs? But it was like a video game. We had to put in a quarter to like keep the game going.
Well, they kind of did that with the Docker Hub, didn't they?
They did though. You've installed TestBox 25 times. Please insert 50 cents to continue. I'm like, crap, our builds are all blocked up. Ching, start.
Yeah, so for those you didn't know, on Docker Hub, there's like a limit now for your public packages, how many pulls you can get on your images.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are hitting their limits very quickly.
So the limit isn't on the image being pulled, it's on the person pulling it. So, people started coming in Slack and saying, hey, my builds are failing. It's saying it can't pull the Orders command box image. We're like, well, yeah, read the message. It says you've pulled as many times as they're going to let you pull for free. So if you just authenticate, I think, with just a free Docker Hub account, I think you can like double the amount of pulls.
Okay.
But if you have some like ridiculous amount of pulls, I think you basically have to actually start paying them money. I haven't looked at it too closely, but I guess they probably started measuring the amount of like free bandwidth they were giving the internet. And they were probably like, wait a minute, nobody's paying us for any of this. So
yeah. So anyway, sidetrack. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But back to the Patreon supporters who are making our stuff possible. Thank you.
That's right. ForgeBox is still free because of you guys.
Yep. So thanks Benedell, Brett DeLine, Calvin Stanton, Charlie Earhart, Dali, Dan Card, Daniel Garcia, David Ballinger, Tadia Lesnicki, Don Bellamy, Edgardo Caberas, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, Jan Yannick, Jason Diger, Jeff McLean, Jeremy Adams, Jonas Erickson, Jordan Clark, Joseph Lamory, Kai Koenig, Laxmer Terahadi, Mario Rodriguez, Matthew Darby, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Patrick Flynn, Ross Phillips, Scott Steinbeck, Sean Oden, Stephen Klotz, Synaptrix, and Yogesh Misir. So that's pretty cool little list there. It's getting bigger and bigger every week, and that's
you guys are keeping ForgeBox free. It's all on your shoulders.
Yep. So next time it goes down, pay up. No, just kidding.
ForgeBox never goes down.
Yeah. No. Not for long anyway, right, Brad? Because everybody screams. It means somebody's using it. That's a good thing.
Yeah, we know that people are using ForgeBox because if it blips for any reason, it's like count the seconds or the minutes before you start getting pings. People are like, hey, my build just failed. What's going on, guys?
Yeah, I think it's a good sign we got that many people using builds that rely on it and depend on it. So pretty cool. But anyways, that's the end of the show for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving, no matter where you are in the world, even though most of you don't really celebrate it. But you guys have a good one. We'll see you all next week.
Adios, amigos.
Have a good one. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.